Today's stories do contain subject matter that some people may find disturbing, and viewer discretion is advised. And as always, if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I've been a long-time listener to podcasts where people have told their scary stories, or told about creepy encounters and whatnot, but I never personally expected to have one of my own. Now that I do, I figured why not share it with the world and see if maybe it can be used as a lesson to others, or help people avoid similar events. If nothing else, at least it could be considered entertainment to some. I live in a small town that I like to think is pretty safe. There really aren't many crimes that I hear about around town, and I've never really met anyone that I've felt threatened by around the town. I've been without a car for a while, and I just walk from my house to a nearby bus stop to get to work, and then do the same to get home. The bus stop to get home is a bit annoying, because they don't stop at the same spot where they pick me up in the morning. So I end up having to walk about 25-ish minutes from the second stop to my apartment complex. It's a bit annoying, sure, but it is what it is. And since I don't have a car, it's all I have to rely on most of the time. Now, this whole event happened a few weeks ago. It was a normal day at work. I was super busy, and by the end of the day, I was seriously exhausted. I got to my stop, got on the bus, and I was sitting in the seat kind of just dozing off a bit while making sure that I didn't actually fall asleep. Something I've gotten pretty good at over the couple of years that I've done this routine. After a bit of just sitting there and being rocked back and forth by the jostling of the bus, we hit a bit of a pothole, and the bump of it actually pulled me completely out of my half-asleep state. I shook my head and kind of looked around, and when I did, I noticed that there was a guy a few seats ahead of me that was sitting with his back against the sidewall of the bus, and he was staring at me. I don't mean like sly, maybe he has a crush on me type staring. I mean full-on glaring. Like I stole his wallet and kicked his dog and he knew that it was me style staring. I had literally no idea who this guy was. I had never seen him on this bus route before, and I was a bit creeped out, so I just kind of thought, I'll ignore it the best I can and that'll be it. He's just kind of creepy. The entire ride to my stop, he just sat there, staring at me, with the same wide-eyed glare. It got to the point where I thought that maybe he was blind, and he wasn't actually staring at me, and maybe I was just being insensitive. It was such an awkward situation, and I really was trying to rationalize or think about it in any logical or even illogical way that I could. After a while, we were approaching my stop, and I was almost a bit hesitant to get off, but I wasn't about to make my 20-something minute walk turn into 40 or more minutes just because of this guy. As we approached, I got up and walked toward the exit of the bus. And as I passed this guy, he definitely turned his head to watch me. Then, much to my misfortune, as I walked past his seat, he stood up and started following me. I had no idea what to do. I had already shown that this was my stop by getting up, and there weren't a lot of people on the bus, so it wasn't like I was going to be able to get anyone to help me. I decided that I could maybe mention something to the driver and they could help me, or at least stop this guy from getting off the bus with me, because I was creeped out. I really was at a loss of what could be done because, technically, him just being a weirdo wasn't a crime. The second that I turned to make a comment to the driver, this guy grabbed my shirt and pushed me toward the door, and I'm not exaggerating, he practically threw me off of the bus. He grabbed me and shoved me with all of his strength out the doors and onto the curb. I was lucky that I was able to halfway catch myself, and that I didn't smack my head on the bus stop sign, or the bench, or the concrete. As I fell, this guy seriously pointed at me and said, "If I ever catch you on this bus again, I will kill you." This was obviously terrifying, and it caused a lot of chaos to ensue, mostly from the driver. He was yelling at the guy. The couple of other people that were on the bus were standing up and approaching the man that had just threatened me, and I was just sitting there on the ground, terrified for my life. As soon as the other people got to the guy, he jumped off the bus and took off at his full sprint. Within moments, he was gone, and they were helping me up, and the driver told me to get back on the bus while he called the cops to escort me home. I was thankful that he let me back on to wait, and that he was willing to call in to dispatch that there was an incident, so that I wasn't there alone. The cops did come. They asked for a description. They asked me if I knew the guy, and I told them the whole thing, that he was just staring at me creepily, and that when I went to get off the bus, he shoved me and threatened me. To be honest, they really didn't seem like they wanted to believe me when I said I didn't know the guy, but I assured them that I had never seen him before in my life. They took all the info from everyone, and then one of the officers did actually give me a ride home, thankfully. And that's pretty much the end of it. They haven't contacted me to let me know that there's been any progress, and my guess is that there won't be, because it was such a random incident, and beyond a description, I don't know if they had anything else on the guy. It definitely scared the hell out of me, and it's actually made me a bit nervous to ride the bus again, just in case he wants to make good on his threat. But I'm hopeful that it was just a one-off incident and that I never run into this crazy dude ever again. Alright, I spent my entire slow day at work yesterday reading through this sub, so now I want to share my little story. My childhood best friend, Marie, and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown, and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided that we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright out, but beginning to lose light. The path that we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush. So, we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. We hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then the sound of running footsteps followed. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess that I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement light off. We pick up speed as much as we can without breaking into a sprint, knowing that the ice cream shop is only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks and we're in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop. And I go along with it silently, understanding that ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We're both looking around, but it seems that whatever scared her is nowhere in sight at this point. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out to the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He'd been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, and he had a terrible smirk on his face, and she swore that as he stopped running, she saw him put something shiny away into his coat. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sound that we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pulled out my old Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God, given me just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale, lifting a hand to point to what she's seeing. I turn, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake and staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time, as the sun got lower and lower. We did manage to have someone come with the truck, but by the time we reached the shore, it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop, inform an adult there, and ask her parents to come get us then, but it worked out. We got back safe, and we thankfully never saw that man again. Lily here again. I mentioned before that I'm a freshman in high school, so 9th grade for me. I'm 15 as of now. This story is, though, from the 7th or 8th grade, or maybe even from the summer between those 2 grades. But it was definitely warm and I was 13 or 14. I'm not going to mention the name of the town I was in. The one that my mom lives in is where I was, since I was staying with her and my stepdad at the time. Since my mother is a realtor and leader of her own team, she owns an office building. I also have an electric scooter. Both are relevant. And this was either the first or second time that I was allowed to go downtown where my mother's office is by myself. I was on my electric scooter, which makes my trip 10 to 30 minutes faster. As I mentioned beforehand, this was my first or second time going by myself, so I wasn't sure about the path. On this trip, I managed to forget where to turn, so I missed the turn that I needed to take. I was in front of a hotel in my town, going back home, since I couldn't find my way around downtown. This older guy on this bike, I believe he may have been homeless, but he came out from behind the bush or 2 in front of me and he was on the grass, and I was on the sidewalk. It was, for some reason, hard to hear him. It probably was just me though, but he started talking to me. He said something like, "That's the kind of scooter that runs on milk and cookies," and he laughed. I gave a fake smile. He said some more, but I can't remember what. I just kept giving the same fake smile and nodding, hardly saying anything since this guy was giving off some pretty weird vibes. I'm pretty shy and introverted, but am completely willing to meet others and have small talk and stuff. But I wanted to get away from this guy, which is normally weird. I don't usually feel that way when in a normal conversation with somebody. Another thing that he said, again, not 100% sure what he said, but this is what I remember. I met this one girl and I said that I had to show her something in my hotel room that I got here. She followed me and I had a safe full of money and she was like, "What?" I can't remember if that's exactly what he said, but that's what I currently remember. In the back of my mind, I thought, this almost sounds like this guy kidnapped a girl. It sounded more sinister since it was different wording then. And then I finally got the chance to say, "Hey, I gotta go. I'm hungry and need to get back home." And then I left. I didn't leave the house much on my own for a week or 2, maybe even a month. One day, a while later, I was going to Burger King to get chicken nuggets for my golden retriever named Zora. I was leaving it, and I'm pretty sure that I saw him again. He yelled, "Hey!" as a greeting in my direction, and I just ignored it. And I haven't seen him since. For context, this happened when I was around 12. I'm 19 now, and I am female. Anyways, I've always been very street smart and was very mature at a very young age. It ended up helping out a lot in my favor. I used to have a best friend that was like a sister to me growing up, so her family was like family to me as well. We used to go to our local theme park all the time. We had year passes. One day when we went, her mom and two sisters, 6 and 8, also went with us. On the way there, the older one had to go use the restroom, so we stopped at the closest place, which ended up being a Circle K. Her mom had a small Civic that was older, so we had the windows halfway up to let the air in because the AC was garbage. And when they went to the bathroom, I somehow ended up in the front seat. I think I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. And I stayed in the car with her youngest sister while everyone else went inside. I then noticed a man come out of the store, take a look at us, and then look at his car, then back to us. He was obviously thinking about something. Not necessarily anything bad, but you could visually tell that he was thinking of what to do. He then puts the stuff he just bought in his car, gets in, and grabs something. He then gets out of his car and comes right up to the driver's side door. I was in the passenger, and reaches his arm through the window to dangle a small, single pearl necklace in my face, and asked me if it was mine. I said no, and he asked again if I was sure, with such a weird, giddy smile that he was hiding, and the same smile he had looking for the thing. I had my hand on the door as soon as I saw him, and the only thing going through my mind was protecting the 6-year-old in the back seat, who was out of the car seat and leaned up on the center console to see what he was showing me. I lightly but sternly pushed her back to show her something was wrong. I luckily have always been that way, and so my fight instinct kicked in very fast, and I told him off. And then I rolled the window up on his arm. I can't remember exactly what I said, but to make a longer than necessary story short, we called the police and we couldn't proceed with anything because he never directly asked me to get in the car with him. But I know that his intentions were not good. His whole vibe was horrible. I'm so glad that I was not alone in the situation, as I might have frozen up or something. I hope that this guy is somewhere far away from everyone, though. I think about it sometimes, and I just pray that he hasn't done the same thing again since. I met Trent when I was 30 years old. We met in a relatively old-fashioned way, mainly because I've always shunned online dating and prefer meeting people face-to-face. I've always trusted my gut instinct when I meet people, and we met at a town dance. I come from one of those country towns where everyone knows each other and there is a strong sense of community out here. And while people are suspicious of strangers, they tend to turn a blind eye to bad behavior from people inside the community. It's one of the most frustrating parts of living in a community like this. Despite this, I do love my hometown. Trent, which is a nickname by the way, was the cousin to one of the more well-established families in the town. If you're not from one of these small towns, it can be hard to understand, but essentially, many of their family has important businesses and own a considerable amount of the property. Trent wasn't raised in the town, and was raised in one of the big cities. Trent was charming, sweet, and caring. Everyone told me how lucky I was to be with him, and if we got married, I would basically be set for life. We dated for nearly 2 years before we moved in together. 6 months later, we were engaged, and he told me how he wanted to look after me. Now, I was raised by a very long line of independent women who wanted to make sure that they make their own money. But over time, I was worn down by the promises and the hope of an easy life. I let him take care of the finances, and we lived a pretty good life, regularly going on expensive trips into restaurants, buying new clothes and lots of items I didn't really need. I was living the good life. My friends frequently told me how jealous they were that I found someone like this, and I thought I was blessed too. Whenever I would try to conserve our power usage, Trent would reassure me not to worry and say that it was covered. I personally didn't like this, though. It was wasteful. Trent and I talked about having children together someday, what we would name the kids, how we would raise them, and what we wanted for our family. Trent wanted a massive family with something like 7 children. I'm not young by any means and didn't realistically think I could have that many. I told him this, and he said he was okay with it. I ended up having 3 kids with him, who are my whole world. I love each of them. Over time, my focus changed from having a lifestyle around going out and socializing to raising our children. I don't think that he liked this as much, and he went out of his way to spoil our kids, buying them whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. I told him that it was a bad idea to spoil them, and so, in my children's eyes, I was the big mean mummy. He told me one day that he wanted to leave the quiet country town that we had called home, a place that I lived my entire life. We talked about it, and we looked for places that we could go. He seemed kind of panicked about it for some reason, but he wouldn't tell me what the problem was. I kept asking him if I could help, and he got really snappy at me. And one day he even punched a wall that he got so worked up. That wasn't the same man that I married. I actually woke up one day and all of his things were gone. He took a bag, left an apology note. I called everyone. His family, his friends, the police, and there was no sign of this ever coming. Our children were so scared for their father and they missed him terribly. Then, I found the stash of bills and credit cards that had been taken out using my name. I stared in shock at them. He hadn't been paying the bills and there were final notices approaching. I actually had my first panic attack and woke up on the floor. I thought it was a nightmare, but this was my reality. I called up the bank and utilities company, and anyone who would listen to me. I called my mom and my friends. I was terrified about what would happen. I was scared that I was going to lose the house, and I tried to call my husband's number, begging him to come home to sort this all out. As it turns out, Trent had been in debt, and he'd actually done this thing before. There was even a pending investigation into him, and I couldn't believe how stupid I was. It's taken years to properly clear my name and my credit. Financially, he destroyed me. And I wish I had kept working to keep up my skills in the job market. Luckily for me, a family friend actually heard of the situation and gave me a job, some advice, and a place to stay while things were being sorted out. It was hard on the kids. They were used to getting whatever they wanted, and they then had to make do with whatever they had. They would ask me where their dad was, and I would have to lie to them, telling them that he loves them and would be coming home someday. I try to look for him on social media sometimes when I have spare time. One time I actually found him, and he was already with another woman. As the investigation went on, I discovered that I wasn't the only woman that he conned, and if he isn't stopped, I won't be the last. Ever since, I've been trying to repair my life. I'm trying to legally get a divorce, and at first his family tried to brush it off or blame me for what happened. But I'm not going to be silenced over this. Some of the friends that I had when I was living the high life, of course, disappeared when I needed them most. But here's my advice that I have for any young woman or young man or whoever out there. Don't blindly trust someone to manage your finances. Always at least be somewhat involved in the process, and try to keep an eye on your money. If possible, also keep up your skills in case something happens where you have to rejoin the workforce. Because I really wish that I did. The story takes place over Snapchat. I was a 16-year-old female in high school, and as most my age, I was pretty active on the app. I received a notification that a new friend had added me. They went by a name that I had never heard before, but being the dumb teenager I was, I accepted their friend request anyway out of curiosity. I noticed that their snap score was extremely low. A snap score determines how active a person is on their Snapchat account. The higher the snap score, the longer they've had the account. The fact that their snap score was extremely low made it seem as if they had just created this account very recently. They started to message me right away after I accepted. Almost immediately, I could tell that this was a fake account that somebody had created. They started chatting with me, and they then started to send me inappropriate pictures of themselves. Their face was never in the pictures, and an inappropriate picture I assume they found online. They would harass me and say really cruel things to me, as if they had it out for me. I would tell them off because their harassment towards me made me feel very upset and targeted. I would later find out a few things about them, one of them being that they followed me on Instagram. They sent me a screenshot of my profile. This was definitely somebody that I knew. They also admitted that they went to the same high school as me. I decided to block them soon afterwards. For years, throughout the rest of high school and even after, I would get random accounts from the same name and different names doing the exact same thing. Sending inappropriate pictures and being very hateful and stalkerish towards me. This made it hard because, since they used different names sometimes, I would just assume it was someone from school whom I didn't know who got my username from one of my friends. Sometimes I would be anxious to walk home alone after school, thinking they may try and follow me and get me alone. They made around 10 accounts in total over the few years that this took place. What I found even more creepy is they went as far as to add me on Snapchat on my birthday. And when I accepted, they wished me a happy birthday, which meant that they knew my birth date. They did this on my graduation day too. On my graduation day, they also said more cruel things to me, almost as if they were trying to ruin my graduation. This person really hated me for some reason, yet I could never think of who it could have been. I couldn't think of anyone at school or elsewhere that could have possibly hated me this much, to target me like this. Unfortunately, I never found out who it was. I assumed it was somebody that I rejected, or my ex, but either way, this person was very unstable. I'm in college now, and thankfully this has stopped. I have a new account on Snapchat with a unique username, so it's much harder for anyone to find me. This happened about 8 years ago, and I still think about it on the occasion and wonder what the hell happened. The summer between my freshman and sophomore years of high school, there was this boy that I liked. Being teenagers, we would sneak out in the middle of the night to this park that was really close to our houses. One night, about 2 in the morning, we were sitting on a picnic table on one end of the park, like we normally would, and we did this for months, and it was like any other night. This park is surrounded 3/4 of the way by canyons, and the park has a playground, soccer fields, and a baseball field. We were just hanging out when we saw 2 people, a man, probably in his 30s, a little heavy set, wearing a red baseball cap and a white t-shirt, and a woman who was a bit younger than him. The boy I was with and I watched the two of them walk across the baseball field and into the canyon. We didn't think anything of it. Maybe they were just going to have relations in the canyon. I don't know. Some people did that. And maybe 5 minutes later, we start to hear screaming. I was not going crazy because it startled the boy that I was with, too. It was nothing like I have ever heard. The screaming was ear-piercing and absolutely horrifying. After about 20 seconds, everything fell silent. We didn't hear anything, but a little while later, maybe a few minutes, the man came walking back out of the canyon, but without the girl. He started walking towards where we were sitting, and we just dipped. We got the hell out of there. We grabbed all of our stuff and ran home. I don't know if he saw us, but we were not sticking around to find out. It was quite dark, so it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't notice anyone was there until he saw two teenagers taking off through the playground. For the next 2 to 3 months, I looked all over the internet and would go look around the canyon for anything to explain what happened. I never found anything, online or in the canyon. I still have no idea what happened that night. This was probably one of the scariest and creepiest things that has ever happened to me. I would also like to say that I was about 14 or 15 when this happened, and was a selfish teenager preoccupied with himself. So, no, I didn't call the police. I should have. I think back on it and beat myself up for not saying anything, but at the time I was only concerned about getting in trouble for sneaking out with the boy. If this had happened today, I would for sure call the police. So, a few days back, I went into a mall a bit far from my house and things were really good that day, but then while I was in the KFC branch in there, someone on Grindr with a blank profile messaged me while waiting for my food at the table. I shrugged it off, and he didn't send me any pictures, just messages saying hi and asked if he could give me the best oral that I would ever have. Seeing as how I was in a public place and absolutely was not in the mood for that, I didn't reply, and then I proceeded to eat my meal. After eating, I then left the mall while bringing the items I bought from there and waited for a ride to get home. It was dark, around 8 p.m., so I had to be vigilant on my surroundings. While looking out on the road, the same guy messaged me and asked me where I was currently. I saw that his distance from me was only 70 meters away, about 230 feet, from where I was standing. That was getting a bit worse, so I closed the app immediately and proceeded to continue ignoring him. Around 5 minutes later, a guy was standing beside me trying to act unsuspicious, even though my gut feelings were telling me something was wrong with him. He looked like he was around his late 30s. I'm 18, by the way, and he was a bit bigger than me in both height and weight. I started getting goosebumps while standing beside him, and it only got worse when he tapped on my shoulder and asked if he could perform on me. I froze, having no idea what to do while being extremely anxious, but then I suddenly punched him in the face when he started grabbing at me and tried to unbutton my pants. I then pushed him off of me hard enough that he laid down on the ground, and I tried running away as far as I could. I then saw him chasing me afterwards. Luckily, a taxi drove nearby and I rushed into it as fast as I could. I know that guy was him, the guy that had been spamming me messages on Grindr, because his Grindr profile told me that he was only 1 meter away from me. I blocked the profile and I logged out of the app. Then what I realized was that I wasn't logged out at the time. Therefore, my location was exposed still, and my profile picture in the app was my face, which wasn't covered, meaning it was easy for me to get identified there. Also, the location of the mall was pretty crappy, and there isn't a lot of lights around it, and it's surrounded by pretty low-looking houses and roads. Worse, there wasn't many people where I stood at the time, and it was also dark. meaning I wasn't able to properly identify the man to report him to the local authorities. So that, my friends, was this week's collection of scary stalker, stranger stories, creepy encounters, let's not meet stories, however you want to describe them. Stories where the creepiest thing in the story is the person standing right next to you. Or, I guess in some cases, the person online talking to you or shoving you off of a bus. Why are people so creepy? Full stop. That is my question to the world. Why can't we all just live and let live and not be creeps, weirdos, scary people, stalkers? Why can't we be that? Why can't we not be them? No. Why can't we not be them? I don't want to be them. What am I saying? Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed this story, this video, this collection of stories. Brain, work with me here. And yeah, if you did, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, want more content like this, hit the subscribe button. You can also be so bold as to leave me a comment down below saying anything you want. I'll listen, I'll read it. And more often than not, as long as my brain is working with me and I'm able to get my head into a good space, I will reply. Typically. I do my best. Yeah. There's also the thanks button down below where you can get early access to... No thanks button is to tip the channel. Join is early access. Patreon's early access. And that's what I was trying to say. All of it supports the channel. Everything you guys do here supports the channel. Watching, thumbs up, commenting, subscribing, super thanks, joining, Patreon, all of it supports me and my channel, and is always appreciated and never ever expected. And all that stuff. Yeah, I am apparently all over the place. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. It's my annual checkup stuff, so I have to not eat. I haven't eaten since this morning. I have to not eat before this so I can get a baseline of everything. So I guess I'm just not all there mentally. Yeah, is what it is. Anyways, friends, hope you're having a beautiful week. I hope I do see you again soon, but until then, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and never ever forget it. And, my friends, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.